first one is Mrs. Alex Evans, who is the head teacher at Pixmoor Primary and Junior School. Good morning, Alex. Great to see you.
Good morning, Carl, and good morning, Danny. Nice to meet you.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning. And then secondly, I want to introduce Nat Baker. Many of you will know Nat. Nat is part
morning,
of morning, mate. He's part of the church here, member of the church with his family, but also he is a member of the leadership team at Fernhill Secondary School. And it's just a real delight to have Nat and Alex, to have you both on here with us this morning. Thanks so much for just making the time to be here. And
pleasure.
And I know that over the last number of months that for anybody who's a teacher, and we have quite a number of teachers who belong to the church here, and talking with them and the opportunity to pray with them, it's been a tough season, right? It has been a hard 9-10 months, probably quite grueling. And we just want to say we have been praying for you as in your roles, but also all of our teachers and those in that place of education, for families and pupils and children. And there are just so many people that are affected by this. And we just wanted to take a few moments this morning just to really hear from you. Last week we had Randy and Tintin, who work in the NHS and in Lister Hospital. It was so powerful just hearing from them about their context, what's going on. And we just this week wanted to hear a little bit about what's going on in that place of education right now. And so, Alex, I wonder if I could come to you first, and just for a minute or so, just share, I guess, really a summary, really, of what have been some of the what's it been like for you over the last 9-10 months, and for your kind of context at Pixmoor and with others? Just take a few moments just to share with us a little bit about that.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Well, it's been a very interesting 9 months. We had obviously started in March, and we weren't sure how long things were going to take, what our expectations were, how our families were going to cope. But as time went on, it was that missing the children and missing that contact with the children. But it's also trying to maintain the link between us and our families, and trying to say to parents, we don't expect you to be in our role. We can't expect you to be in our role, but we can give you some support, and just kind of say to them, it's fine. We will pick up the pieces at the end of the day. You'll come back to us. We'll sort it out. And I just really was concerned, I think, that some of the parents had this overwhelming expectation on themselves that they have to do what we do. And to be the best of I've got kids, trying to educate my children is a nightmare, let alone, trying to do your own. And if you've got a number of children within a family. So there was that aspect. And there was the aspect of trying to keep our school community together. So it's about thinking about ways in which we could make sure that we stayed together as a community. So perhaps doing some competitions. We had a photography competition. We took photographs and made a sort of whole school rainbow. We walked all the way to Antarctica. So trying to do community things as well to bring us together. And then obviously we had to prepare for coming back. We had our year sixes back, not all the time because we had it small groups. And there was that heightened anxiety from staff because they didn't know what they were going to be faced with, and around about how we were going to manage all of those sorts of things. We had to put in place all the physical things like barriers and hand washing and facilities to do that, which, I think people thought we were closed all the time. We weren't. We had children here, but we were in a different capacity in the summer. We were childcare, whereas now this time we're in education, and the expectation is we're doing all this digital live lessons and recorded lessons, 4 hours of, and again, that's a huge expectation on parents, particularly if they've got a number of children within the family, about their ability to cope with that. Do they have the internet access? Do they have the routers? Do they have the devices? And there's and the food to keep themselves going, and the resources, the pens, the papers, all of those sorts of things, which we would have in school, which sometimes families don't have access to. So there is that still big digital divide that we have within our families. We also saw needs increase. So our free school meals that we get with children coming in, that was at 48 when we left in March. It's now gone up to 67. So that's 67 children. So that's quite a big increase for us. It's 28% of our school community, which doesn't sound a lot, but it is quite significant. So there's those sort of aspects as well. But also, again, this time round, I think members of our school staff team have been ill with COVID, and people who didn't have any underlying health issues. So that there was that really heightened anxiety. And we see also coming back, and I know probably Nat's had this as well, with children with quite significant mental health issues, where perhaps they have had some niggly things before, but now it's kind of full blown, particularly around obsession with cleanliness, hand washing, being around people and having lots of people around. So there's all that to manage as well. So it's been a really busy kind of 9 months. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. It's been lovely having the children in, but then to turn around and we'd kind of planned, we knew at the start of this, we knew we had a struggle with staffing. So we decided we would not open on that first day back, but I think then subsequently Boris then made his announcement, so we've had to kind of get ready, but also to again try and keep everybody together, but also reassure parents that we're not expecting them to do the whole gamut. We just want them, just keep things ticking over. All right, we've got all this, we can do 4 hours of learning if you want to, but you don't have to do it all. And actually, it's the most important thing is your family's happiness and that your family and your child's well-being. And it's just making sure all those things are together. So I hope that's kind of given you a flavour. As a head, it's been sometimes, there'll be times where I really cried because I can't see the children, or I can't see things, and my parents are shielding, and we've had a member of staff who's shielding. So it's managing all of those things as well. But also, when the joy of when all the children came back in September, seeing their faces, and they were just so pleased to be back in the school community and have that norm and have that routine, and to see us as well. So we've had a good December term. That autumn term was really good, and then to go back into this again is, it's a bit soul destroying in some ways. But we will get through it, and we will do it, and we've got opportunities. So there we go. I hope that's given you a flavour. Sorry, I talk too much.
Absolutely. No, Alex, that's fantastic. And I think obviously, the fact that there is just so much to share just tells you exactly what is happening. And for Danny and I, our daughter attends the school that you're head of, and just so appreciative of you and your staff and everything you do, both personally, but also within our community. Nat, I wonder if I could ask you the same question, really. I guess very briefly, just a bit of a summary of what it's been like for you in a secondary school environment over the last number of months.
Well, I have to repeat everything Alex has said. I mean, she summarised it very well. It's been an absolute roller coaster, and pretty much everything she said is also true for secondary schools. I think some of the issues that we've had as secondary school is obviously around the examination side. So we have a lot of students in the older years, particularly GCSE and sixth form, that have really, really struggled not knowing if they're facing exams, what exams will look like. And that has led to, as Alex said, a huge increase in anxiety and mental health issues, as some students have really, really struggled to this sense of what is their future. And I think for us, it's been that whole challenge. What is a secondary school about now? What is our purpose? I feel much more that we are now social workers than we are teachers. I think ever since the last lockdown, we spent more time checking on the welfare of our students than we did on learning. I think that in that first lockdown, it was about safety. We were doing weekly phone calls, we were doing online questionnaires, but it was really hard to necessarily check on all our children, and particularly as children get older, they're less willing necessarily to talk. And there's a real issue with students and the real feeling of isolation. Many students realise that school was their safe place and they'd lost their safe place. I think that has been a really massive challenge for us, as we've got young adults who are kind of developing, but at the same time, they now see a world of fear and they don't see consistency and continuity. Like, will I do an exam or not? Something none of us has ever considered not doing. We've got our young children now who are really, really fearful about what's happening tomorrow, never mind what's happening in their exams this summer. So I think a big challenge for us has been, how do we equip our teachers to properly manage that? It's easier if you're in a classroom to support them emotionally. It's much harder if they're working from home. So talking about Alex's point, in terms of IT and connection, and some students that are just bottoming out. I work with all the North Hart schools, secondary schools, and we had a meeting this week where we're all agreeing that really it's only between 70 and 80% of students in all secondary schools that are actually engaging. So we have 20% of our North Hart community that are just bottoming out. They're finding it all too much, all too terrifying. And it's, how do we make them safe? How do we look after them? And then there's the other side. We're now nurses. We're doing the COVID testing, all that stuff. Well, pressure on teachers to try and engage in online learning. Zoom and Google Meets. We never heard of these things until lockdown. So it's learning all these new things, and teachers been constantly on the front trenches, as it were, with government announcements and trying to keep up to speed what the government are doing. So it's been a real challenge, I have to say.
Wow, thanks, Nat. Do you know what? And again, we have got a daughter in secondary school as well. And on behalf of her, she isn't in Fernhill, but on behalf of her and all the children actually in secondary schools right now, I just want to say a massive thank you to all the secondary school teachers as well, and all the staff that are working so hard. I know personally, we have had a few moments of feeling overwhelmed, and we've had to journey that. And we are really blessed with what we've got at home, and I'm able to support them the best I can. But still, there's moments of feeling overwhelmed, and I can't even imagine how teachers must be feeling right now, staff, and also families and children. I mean, I have absolutely loved chatting to you guys over the last couple of weeks and getting to know actually some of the real prominent needs that you've expressed that are in your schools and in your school communities right now. And what's really interesting is some of them are just very, very similar, but actually some of them are very, very different as well. And so I would love to hear from you, Mrs. Evans, about some of the real prominent needs that you're finding in your children and in your families right now. Some of those things that you were sharing with me on the phone last week.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Yeah, some of the things we're coming across is, as I said, the lack of resourcing. They don't have the tools at home, so they don't have the stationery that you think that majority of households have. But trying to find a piece of paper and a pen or all of those things, so we're having to provide. We provide printed packs for some of our families, and we've provided some of them. But you don't often get. They don't always tell you what their needs are, and you're having to second guess a little bit sometimes because there's an element of pride in there as well. They don't want you to know all their business. So it's a little bit about building those bridges and saying to people, look, you don't have to struggle. We can help. We can support in some way, but you need to tell us. We're not mind readers. The digital stuff we talked about. We've just had last week, we had our delivery from the DAFS of our Chromebooks, so we're able to kind of send those out, but we didn't have sufficient to give one to all of our children and all of our families that have said they're struggling. So we've had to kind of find other resources. So that's another issue. And some of the things we've had as well is about emergencies. So, some of them have really struggled to pay bills. It's January is a horrible time of year anyway. And, they wanted to make Christmas good. And so they've got themselves into financial difficulties. So it's supporting those. And we've tried where possible. We've said we've put them, to the Citizens Advice, or we've tried to give them some support in that and found freebies of things and said, oh, this might help. But it is a real struggle. Sometimes we can't, as Nat said, you feel you are a bit of a social worker trying to sort these families' problems out. And they're almost always really grateful for whatever we can do. But I think that's where we're finding the issues is that, families are struggling. Sometimes it's food. Yeah. And we've used the food bank. We've got our own little supply of food that we give for emergency things. We've just started now our food bank our food vouchers. We were giving parcels, but when we spoke to parents, a lot of them liked the online vouchers that we did in the summer. So we've gone back to doing online, although I quite like the parcels because at least then you were getting to see the families. It's really, you don't, unless we're dropping things off or going to see them. We have so I think that's where our issues are, is resourcing and helping when there's a crisis, because sometimes they don't know where else to go. And because we're in that immediate contact, we've got a closer relationship than perhaps other agencies have. So we are being a conduit for lots of things.
Absolutely. And I think what was really interesting that you shared with me as well, that you were using a lot of your school fund money that you would use for school. Actually, that resources was going to help families with resourcing stuff at home, not necessarily educational stuff, but some bills and things like that, which is really incredible for you guys as a school. And again, we just want to thank you for the heart that you have for your community. Now, it'd be good to hear, again, I'm sure some of those things echo as well, but what are the main prominent areas that you see in Fernhill with your families and your children?
I think Letchworth, we need to understand that we've got significant evidence of massive poverty here in Letchworth. You know, I hope you realise that the catchment area for Fernhill, around the Bursland areas, is the poorest area of the whole of Hertfordshire, poorest in all regions of Stevenage, and we have huge issues with socioeconomic poverty and real food poverty. So very similar to Pixmore. I think what COVID has done is it's revealed the level by which many of our families are living on the knife edge, and how much school, with free school meals and with the resources we gave, were keeping families afloat. And so we've had many families, just the same as Pixmore, that are basically crashing in terms of every aspect. So number one, they don't have the resources they need, absolutely, you know, simple things like pens and paper. Number two, we've had huge issues initially with IT, both in terms of usage, but particularly things like Wi-Fi. We have, you know, obviously big families sometimes with 2 or 3 children in the family, and we've got one phone, one mobile phone they're using, and then we give them, just like Alex said, we can go to give them one Chromebook. But again, we've got students in sixth form, GCSE, and lower years, and the lower years child's getting no access to learning because so a lot of our work has been trying to coordinate, and just like Alex said, it's some families are not willing to share those needs, others are, and so it's trying to coordinate and really find out from parents what their needs are. In terms of food, that's also a massive thing. Obviously the work Marcus Rashford did in terms of food over the holidays, that particularly revealed again how many of our families are living on the knife edge with food, and there's no guarantee of a meal a day. So we've been using the vouchers, but again, you know, with the February half term coming, I know for many of my families that's a real concern, how they're going to feed their children over that week. And I think the other aspect for us has been, combined with that, is safety. You know, we've had a lot of rise in domestic violence issues and crises at home, sometimes linked around learning, because by GCSE level age, parents are finding they don't understand the work, and so there's been conflict with grumpy teenagers that don't want to learn, and that's led to crises, police being called, etc. So we've had a large increase in emotional wellbeing issues and domestic violence cases, for example. So it's trying to work on where we can get them to be safe. But yeah, food and resourcing, you know, it's a massive issue on our doorstep here from hundreds of our children.